Today's question comes from Elena, who wonders, what if Earth rotated twice as fast? Well, Elena, besides everyone waking up with a killer case of vertigo, we'd all suddenly discover just how much we've been taking our leisurely 24-hour days for granted. First, let's start with the basics. If Earth's rotation doubled, one day would only last 12 hours. That means 6 hours of daylight and 6 hours of night. Assuming you're not near the poles, where things get creative. This new turbocharged planet would whip you from sunrise to sunset, faster than a poorly planned vacation. Rush hour would literally become rush 5 minutes. You'd leave work just in time to see the moon rise and realize you've forgotten to have lunch, dinner, and a midlife crisis. Now, because the planet's spinning faster, the centrifugal force at the equator increases. Not enough to fling you into orbit, unless you weigh less than a bag of marshmallows, but enough to make things weird. Gravity would feel slightly weaker at the equator, which might sound great until you realize it also means the oceans would bulge outward like a stressed-out balloon. Sea levels at the equator would rise by up to 100 meters, which is great news for aspiring underwater city developers and terrible news for Florida. Meanwhile, the poles would be smugly unaffected, standing still like that one person at a party who refuses to dance. Weather patterns would get a dramatic overhaul. Faster rotation means stronger Coriolis forces, which twist winds and currents. Hurricanes, now forming with the speed of a microwave burrito, would be smaller but faster, spinning like toddlers on espresso. Jet streams would become supersonic spaghetti strands of chaos. Your local weather forecast would basically become a high-stakes guessing game. Partly sunny, mostly windy, and occasionally sideways. Time zones, forget it. You'd now pass through them like towns on a speeding train. If you traveled west at just over 1,000 miles per hour, you could effectively freeze time and stay in eternal afternoon. Of course, that's assuming you survive the air friction and don't get turned into a human beef jerky strip. But perhaps the most fun consequence involves our own biology. Human circadian rhythms are stubborn things, evolved for 24-hour cycles. Suddenly shifting to 12-hour days would be like forcing everyone on Earth to permanently live with jet lag. Sleep cycles would implode. People would wake up at 6 a.m., eat breakfast, and start craving dinner by 9 a.m. Productivity might spike at first, then crash spectacularly as entire populations confuse AM and PM, sleep through work meetings, or eat breakfast 3 times a day just to cope. Plants, too, would struggle. Photosynthesis isn't a speed sport. Many crops rely on consistent daylight to grow. A planet spinning like a record player would throw off growth cycles, possibly making wheat as moody and unproductive as a teenager in finals week. Farmers would have to adapt with artificial lighting, vertical farming, or just start growing mushrooms and despair. And if that weren't enough, the moon would also start drifting away faster. That's because Earth's rotation affects tidal forces, which in turn affect the moon's orbit. Over millions of years, this could mean more distant lunar views, weaker tides, and sad werewolves howling at an increasingly tiny dot in the sky. Eventually, humanity would adapt. Clocks would switch to 10-hour shifts, calendars would double their days, and caffeine would become legally recognized as an essential vitamin. Meanwhile, a few people would start nostalgic clubs, where they gather under artificial 24-hour lights to pretend it's the good old days. Before sunsets became coffee breaks, and mornings raced past like commercials. And that, Elena, is what happens when Earth gets the urge to spin, like it's training for the Interplanetary Olympics.